So Bob, you wanna kick us off? We have the discussion. I don't know if you wanted to do screen share
Oh,
what you
sure.
guys have been working on.
Yeah, so I'll just share our site here. So we've got, I'll just share the whole desktop. All right, so this is our Drupal 8 site. So we built this whole thing using the paragraphs module, and we're looking to take the content that's here and basically transform it visually and structurally. So not only are we going to change the card-based system into a more unified block layout, but we also want to take the paragraphs and turn them into web components. So the discussion that I wanted to have today was basically, we have this LRN design repo, right? There's a lot of great stuff on there, but how do we take what we have and make it our own, but still do it in a way that kind of aligns with the community? I don't like the idea of creating these like code silos. Like everyone has their own element that does this one specific thing, but a lot of people have cards or blocks or examples or just any kinds of regions. So I wanted to see what Bryan had to say or anyone else, basically how we can sort of turn this into a more Penn Statey kind of design, but also make it abstract enough that it aligns with the LRN stuff that we already have. So this is the current design. We have everything in the paragraphs module. We tried to abstract it enough where it's just basically one single content block, and then you have different like regions. You can change the stylings, and a lot of it aligns with Bootstrap just because it's a lot easier to explain, like, okay, here's how you put an image that has a rounded edge and that kind of stuff. Like they have very good documentation in my opinion. So I just kind of tried to stick with that. But basically what I'm trying to do now is take our super basic cards. We have tons of different kinds, but they're essentially the same thing, just branded differently, right? So how do we take that and turn it into one single web component that you can sort of alter a bit differently? So our new design kind of looks like this here. So it's still very much in progress, but everything is sort of in line. So there's no more cards anymore. And then it's all the same content. It's just one block instead of, you know, multiple individual self-contained things. So, I mean, not very complicated. It's a simple block. I like the idea of just having that LRN content block and then being able to sort of tweak it to have our own flavor, I guess. But I just wanted to see what kind of guidelines we have for contributing to the existing stuff, maybe work it in as like an actual thing. So, I mean, there's different ways we can go about it, but right now it's just all in paragraphs and I'm working to get it out. So it is still very much in progress. So that's what I got.
Cool. Can you call that back up so
Sure.
we can talk over top of it or whatever? I really like specifically I guess you call it the like software specific card.
Yeah, so like if I wanted a card that, you know, is, so a lot of the times we have examples for software, but it varies between operating systems. So we want to make it clear, like this region only applies to the Windows version of something. But yeah, I mean, these are all
And
the
so
same.
would they be the same card as that one fundamentally under the hood? Like that's the same design asset. It's just the way it's
It is the
presented.
same card, yeah. So I only have one paragraph, basically, two on this site at the moment. We have the basic card that you can change the styling of, and then we have so there's the ones that is like sort of overlaying, and then there's the inset card. So we have the course goals is sort of the other type that we have. Those are the only two kinds that we have, and I think when it was loading earlier, it didn't load the editor entirely, but basically you have the different regions that a bootstrap card would have. So you have the header, body, and footer, and then the image for the thing could go on top. It could overlay. It could be a thumbnail in the corner. So we have some that would apply to everyone's course content, I guess. You would have like examples, activities, I guess. Sometimes we even have stuff like just like the yellow like warning, like, hey, take note of this. This is important. I know you guys have like the stop note thing and that kind of stuff. I want to try to get it all into one thing. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
No, yeah.
like,
I think so. I mean, at least immediately I would see this as being like two components. So there'd be one that is that with just that baseline card there that has a bunch of different options. And then I would probably have one, if you could go to those, yeah, or like the
software.
alert. Yeah, the software one. Because I'm going to assume that like the RStudio one isn't implementation of the card that you manually put in and configured or whatever, but it would be cool if someone could just say like software card and software card application equals RStudio or something, and it basically just tweaks the settings that are in your design asset so it looks the right way, but that someone's implementation of it is encapsulated.
Yeah, so I kind of have it separated like that already. So I have like the brand icons already kind of pulled out, and then it just pulls those into here. Like I tried to do everything as like an SVG, so it's like super high resolution. I even made it so like their icon on the website
nice.
changes from blue to orange, just to try to make it align with that company's branding as well. Like especially SAS and Jump, like it's just basically the same company. I know basically every company has to protect their brand, but they're very particular about how you put things on the web. I mean, we have to sign an agreement every time we want to use it on a certain site. So it's like, okay, so we want to display it this way. But yeah, no, I definitely get where this is separate from the normal ones. I think that totally makes sense. This is just kind of an overview of all of them. But we've also done things where so it would be kind of cool where if the RStudio code, the RStudio card also kind of displayed maybe the code region that we have, like code that you see in RStudio, especially like SAS and stuff, not the CSS thing, the other SAS.
Yeah.
The code that is output, if it doesn't look exactly like it looks in the program, it often confuses the students and they're like, well, it doesn't look like this, but it's all saying the same exact thing. They're just not sure where to look. So if it could then also apply those sort of brand specific stylings, that would be like a bonus. But I think at the point that we're at now is basically these cards that are on screen now, you have. So I'm trying to take the basic card and just get rid of that. And then we're going to do, this is a case study. We have an example. We have a formula or a theorem. We have, or no, sorry, this is a formula. This is a theorem. And then we have the activity block. So the activity block also does some things with the styling. So it just basically changes the color to a different thing. So, I mean, there's different stuff like that. I mean, you can go a lot of different ways, but we also try to have other types of elements. So we have alerts, right? And it pulls in the same sort of styling. We have highlights. Yes, that's what I'm showing now. Okay, so we have highlights that are, again, basically the same kind of thing.
It's basically the card. It's just doesn't have the shadow and the box around it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I even tried to work in, so if people didn't like the card design, I just basically made it so you could just like turn off the cards and then you have like that. So that's basically what the new design is going to try to do, is basically just get rid of all the cards and make them kind of highlights now. So, yes, I'm just going to reset that. And then what else do we have? We have callouts, which are basically like inline cards. So there's a lot of room for consolidation here. So they're basically all the same types of things, just slightly different. but we wanted to carry this language across. Like a case study is always going to be blue, an example is always going to be green. I mean, that's just for our site. Like, it doesn't have to be like across the board, but that's how we're just doing things now.
No, but if we had I wish Nikki was here for this because she's great at these things. But if we had, so she made an accent card that's an abstraction of some earlier stuff that we had that was under the LRN design, whatever. That starts to attempt to get at some of this very, not exactly like this, but this type of like, hey, you've got what's basically someone would call a card or an area. What are all the different little, tweaks within that? So she has a lot of different booleans that can be applied to them. And then I don't think we let our instructional designers or faculty use that card. We like implement it in something else, and then they use that, which then has a instructional significance or whatever. So okay. I mean, even down to like the colors, if there was some mapping of CSS variables, then you guys could have your color code that effectively, right? Like formula is orange, but if Eberly said, well, we use orange for something else.
I kind of went crazy with the color palette here. So basically everything is kind of a shifted version. I took a pretty cool website. It basically calculates the different offsets for you. So I have an extra dark. This is basically the baseline. Then I have a light and an extra light variant of all of these. So the highlight might be like the medium, and then the background might be the extra light. So I try to do like offsets, like very programmatically designing your theming. Like, you have a color that is the Penn State branded color, but then you also want different variants that aren't like official colors, but you still kind of need that. So, I mean, that's how we tackled that problem. But basically, these are just like overrides to just say like the bootstrap colors again. So you have like just, double-dash yellow or double-dash orange. Like you can override your own color for that. I mean, all the stuff that's on this site is usually, so these are all the variable names actually. So they're all PSU branded. But we tried to make it so that everything was already kind of stored in CSS variables. So what do we got here? Accent card, okay.
So as far as, so that's the older, so that's our discontinued repo. So everything's under our mono repo that's elmsln/LRN web components. We used to have an organization called LRN web components when we started. So as far as contributing, I think those are elements that all of us could use and would gladly have access to. I mean, we get asked for stuff like that all the time. And
I mean, there's definitely stuff that applies to us, but yeah, for sure. I think everybody who's teaching is going to want something that is an example or sort of like an activity, or just like highlighting like important notes, or you need to read this, or.
Well, and I really like the software ones as well, because even if like we don't use RStudio, if there's, I mean, I'm again, my mind immediately goes to like, this would be something in Hacks. It has Hacks wiring. Someone can pick from a list of options, right? And if we had our code right next to 25 other common, Penn State or otherwise software libraries, then that just makes it more consistent when people are taking your courses and then taking ours and then taking ones that Mike's worked on. And I mean, Andrew's starting to mess with some of this stuff. Like I would prefer to expend the energy on our side to get these contributed to our mega repo, which you can then use them and do whatever, but like it would just put it more in our build pipeline.
That's the thing. I've turned your thing on here. So I just told people, hey, we don't try to make it in our notes here, but your CDN is on here and it's working. So just figured I would try that out, and the live changing of elements definitely works as well. So it's exciting to be able
Cool.
to
Yeah.
instantly see your results. So it's often, I mean, for me at least, I like to see what something does before I download it and try to use it. So, um, being able to say, hey, here's a component and like it just loads in the page, like very helpful. So,
Yeah.
Small but related tangent. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I remember at Hacks Camp at Duke, Cassandra and Kendall were talking about essentially what you mentioned with components. Like I mean, they were talking about Red Hat components and how they abstracted the color options, so that if someone wanted to use like a Red Hat button or a Patternfly element button, they could do it or implement it in a certain way that uses their brand's color scheme. Um, I mean, could you like maybe talk about that a little more? I wish Cassandra was here too to talk
Yeah,
about it a
maybe
little bit.
I can talk a little bit about it. The way that we do it is it's a layers of variables, right? So there's at the top level there's the generic unbranded um, you know, essentially top level declaration of a a categorization of general things. It may be um, like we'll say card. Card is a great example because it's a block level. So there's the global block level declaration of a variable and all the things that go with it, and then you have like within a component, then you actually have two different slots. You have a theme level, and then you have a component level. And so what ends up happening is um, it gives developers the granularity to say, so like let's take colors since you're doing colors. So like if at the top level, like the theme level, that generic one is is set to a specific thing. So then the component pulls that in as the first order, in the cascade, and then the theme level can override that global one. So I think with our stuff, they tried to pick sensible defaults, and we've gone back and forth about like the sensible defaults originally were Red Hat theme. So and I told him, I said it's not helpful when you have the global ones be the same as your theme, because then no one knows the difference. So the global ones, in the component on the card, you have the background set initially to that global one if it's set, and then your fallback is then the theme level. So if the theme level one is set, then that will override. And you're right, like if you think about the var in the CSS, it's really like it goes and this is where I always forget what it looks like, but it's like uh, I think it's theme, then component is the final fallback, but it's like theme, global, component, something like that. You'd have to look at this stuff. That's the one thing I don't really remember. But we went back and forth around on this but then it gives developers, you still have the hooks to get into that, but you can also define a sensible default in the component itself. So if the majority of your cards all have the same background color, you don't want to have to define that in your theme and then trickle it down. So you define it in the component you're making. But then if you want to override it, you need a hook for that. So yeah, SAS needs a red background, whatever the little nitpicky things are. So you use the variable fallbacks, and then what you do is to get them to fall back, you just don't set the ones above. So it's using the cascade with variables, and a lot of times people don't do that. They override, they set it to one variable, and the problem is then you still have to override the variable down the cascade. Does that
so
make
that's
sense at all?
Yeah, that's sort of what I envisioned too. Like you said, you have the the sensible color scheme. So like we chose these colors, but maybe they're not the, like I was trying to go for colors that actually had like psychology background to it, like people associate this with that. You know, how does this color make you feel? But then when it comes to the branding, like then you can override it with your own.
Yeah, and the key thing is, don't you need a variable that is not the color. It's the what like it's the scope essentially. It's the scope of what you're setting, and then the color comes in after that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the question about workflow always comes up with this example, because you're saying I'm actively developing this locally, and I know that I want to contribute, but do I start contributing, like do I start building this component in the overall repo, in the central repo, or do I build it on my local website, on my local app or project that I'm working on, and then figure out how to get it back into the to the central repo? And I personally like the workflow of just trying things out locally, extending from components that already exist in the central repo, or just build your own and just try stuff out, get it into like one app and see whether you like it or not, and then figure out how to abstract that component to be like ultra reusable. Because I find that whenever if I start with a component and right off the bat think, how can I make this like the most reusable component for everybody? It takes a long time. It's not a good use of my time to develop in that way. So I personally like the method of let's see how it looks in a project, in a real world scenario, real website, and then figure out how to abstract that for everybody. That's my personal take on it.
And I would say from experience with that type of stuff, I think it depends on the maturity level of the repo you're going into eventually, because like with patternfly elements, until you have a pattern of developing for that, it's all like you're going to bash your head against the ground trying to do things to follow the repo's way, when you could just speed up your development process and then help refine that by bringing something in.
Yeah, I'd probably throw it up in like use OpenWC. If you've used OpenWC's tooling before, Bob, they have a really nice, like, just copy and paste this command and then it asks a few questions and you're off and running. So I'd probably put them in something like that. That's what Nara's doing as they contribute stuff to us, as they're working on individual elements in these little repos, refining what the scope is of them. And then once they've gotten a bit of the like scoping of it figured out, and we bounce ideas back and forth, then they're pulling them into a larger repo with some other ones that they're working on. So, I mean, it's easy enough to go from a singular repo into like a mono repo approach, or if you want to, Potter, I know you guys started with having your own alternate WC factory instance. Do you guys still do that?
Not really. It just became more of an inconvenience to have two monorepos. Although long term that might be where we want to go, but in what we found, that what we wanted to do was just get them into production as fast as possible to then iterate on them. So we just ended up copying and pasting elements between projects for the time being, which is definitely not a long-term solution, but it allowed us to iterate on components faster.
Yeah, so I started this specific example with your WC factory. I just made a PSU stat factory and took the naming conventions of like, this is a content block, but aside from that, like I'm just kind of running with it on my own. And then I guess once we come up with something, just share it back. And then if you guys want to include it, you include it. If not, then we'll keep using that anyway.
I'd say the only change I would see probably in including it after you get those up is like Nikki is a stickler for the names of things. So,
Yeah.
or like making sure that any CSS variables that are in those elements have some parallel mashup with the simple color set that she worked on with ours. So I'd probably spin it up in your own WC factory or open WC, whatever you prefer. And then they're easy enough to move around after the fact. I mean, I would love to have them in our main repo, but there's also nothing saying if you have yours up and they're published NPM, or even if they're not and they're just on GitHub, we could easily pull them in and then ship them up to the CDN. I mean, it's not like we're not like power brokering the CDN to that repo. It's whatever you feel comfortable with working on, really. Plus it's easy enough to, so I guess how did you get that on that page actually? Did you just like copy and paste the little
one?
CDN snippet thing?
You were talking about it last week. You had that CodePen.
Oh, okay.
Just copy that into my Drupal theme as a library.
Because you could, even if we didn't put it on the CDN, I'm not saying we wouldn't, but like even if we didn't, you could basically steal that entire approach. The repo that generates all of that is called unbundled web components. And so I just run a script that ends up doing that and adding in all the elements that we make, and they're published. But yeah, I mean, whatever you need so that we can get those, because I want them. Nikki didn't see them, but I want them. And then if I have them, Nikki doesn't have to make them. And so that will make her very happy, because our coworkers ask her for stuff like that all the time. And it has to get pushed down a priority list relative to, wanting a video player or whatever the thing is that it's competing with. So,
and this is the beauty of this, is that now we can really scale all our efforts. So super excited about being able to have other people do cool stuff.
I mean, this is the core of our content. So, I mean, I wanted to try to tackle this first, and it's super basic, but again, like it's something that we can get out quickly and then sort of work different things into.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're in our Slack channel. Feel free to
I'm in
throw whatever. Feel free to throw whatever up as you're working through them. I mean, it'd be cool to have those, do like a code review of those in a week or two or whatever. I mean, even if they're basic, I mean, basic is so relative anymore. So, I mean, some of them literally just throw slots into position, or we could hash out, well, even like something like that, the software logo, like what if someone wanted to use it in a collapsed field set? Well, Nikki has a collapsed field set. So then it starts to be.
Yeah, we do. We use it. So we take those logos and put them into like the tabs. So we have like the vertical and horizontal tabs. Sometimes they'll want to put them in tab lists. So, I mean, they go everywhere.
Yeah. So this stuff will cascade out of control rapidly, and then you will be the lead maintainer on LRN web components, and Nikki will be very happy. I'll be totally cool with that.
Yeah.